It's a Taino thing, get to know the real us, our past, our resurgence in the present. The Taino of Jamaica is a diverse tale of survival, resilience, and endurance. They are the backbone of what makes Jamaica a very special place. They are a testimony of the black, the gold, and the green. We represent Jamaica's oldest inhabitants and Jamaica's longest continuous inhabitants. Time we obliterated the often publicized myth of our extinction. Before the coming of Christopher Columbus in 1494, the Taino Jamaica were called the Yamaye. This was the name from which the word Jamaica is derived from, which in its simplest terms means the land of the Yamaye. The first time Columbus heard that word was in southern Cuba, where the Taino there told him of an island located to their south, which was called Yamaye, a land of much gold. The ka at the end of the word, Jamaica, is an Arawakan language locative, which means land or island. The Yamaye Taino of Jamaica has their own religion, their own political system, their very own society, and the civilization before Columbus came. In your textbooks, you would have read about a people who subsisted on fishing and farming cassava, peppers, yams, and cotton, and planted fruit trees like the guava and pimento. Also, that they hunted and ate coney, a rodent-like mammal, and ate iguanas, a large reptile still found in the Hellshire Hills and on the Goat Islands. You would have also read about their villages being ruled by caciques, and you learned that they worshipped Zimis. But there was much more to their lives than what you read in those textbooks. Much more has been unearthed about our Taino forebears than that. Jamaican archaeologists have discovered over the last few years that they also practiced astronomy, an understanding of the movements of the stars and the planets. With this information, they had a calendar to tell them when to plant their crops, when to go to war, and how to navigate their canoes on long seafaring journeys. They traded over long distances from South America to Central America, and possibly even with North America as well. They had a complex social structure which comprised of villages, districts, and a collection of districts combined into provinces called a casiago, or a kingdom, as the Dominican friar Bartolome de las Casas would clarify it as such. The ruler of which was a paramount chieftain called a cacique, or more correctly pronounced cacique. Puareo, the paramount chieftain of the North Coast, his domain ranged from present-day St. Anne to St. Mary, and his main village, or Yokayeke, as it was called in the Arawakan Taino language of the Caribbean, was located in and around Oracabessa in St. Mary. A fictional account of his life and times was published recently by the author Fred W. Kennedy through the Ian Randall Publishers. We also know of other Jamaican caciques like Ameriro and Guayrabo and Arecibo, who along with 200 of his people were forcibly transported from the island into enslavement on the island of Boriken, otherwise called known today as Puerto Rico by the Spanish. As a matter of fact, there is a area in the eastern end of Puerto Rico that is called Arecibo and is actually named after that cacique. Much atrocities were carried out on the island by the invading Spaniards, who first came with friendship, but who quickly turned to cruelty and the enslaving of the Jamaican Taino. However, because gold was not located on the island was instead converted into a supply colony where large amounts of bammies, cassava bread, dried fish, cured beef, and pork, along with large amounts of cotton, were produced to facilitate the conquest of Mesoamerica, namely the Aztec Empire in Central America, and eventually the Incan Empire, which was located in Ecuador to central Chile in South America. The game of survival. How do we have Taino descendants today, and how can we prove it? A common belief has been promulgated and often repeated that all the Taino on the island were wiped out due to the cruel conditions they suffered under the Spanish. As a matter of fact, this was stated as the fate of all the Taino throughout the Greater Antilles, but this was actually not true. The Taino civilization is extinct, but not the people or their culture. They survived in a number of ways. Many ran away to areas where the Spanish didn't frequent. And this was not very difficult because once gold was not located on the island, the population of Spanish conquistadors fell drastically as most were interested only in gold and the conquest of new lands, not farming, as Jamaica was now only a farming outpost. Some Jamaican Taino ran to the mountains, forming core communities, which later would become maroon settlements as enslaved Africans joined their ranks. Namely, among these communities was the most famous settlement of them all, which would later be called Nanny Town after Nanny, an African woman along with her brothers who escaped to the Yamaye Taino village, which was already in existence long before her arrival. However, its original name was supplanted by the English and called Nanny's Town, after their greatest military opponent. There were other Jamaican Taino who settled near to the Spanish settlements along the coastlines of Jamaica and formed small fishing villages, a number of which existed in St. Elizabeth and other parts of the island, carrying on their traditions and ways and way of life. These fishing villages continued to exist from the time of the Spanish and beyond 1655, when Jamaica was taken by the English to become an English colony, many of which still exist to this day. The maroon settlements too continued to exist. Words from their language continue on as well. The commonly known ones are canoe from canoa, hammock from hamaka, hurricane from hurrican, cassava from casabe, tobacco from tabaca, just to name only a few words which found their way into the Spanish language and were later adapted to the English language. However, right here in Jamaica, there are Yamaye Taino words which are in common use. Just to name one such example, often when someone touches a thorn, they say, "Maka juke me." Well, the word maka is a Arawakan Taino word for thorn, or something with a sharp edge or tip, and is used in the Arawakan word for the Taino sword, a wooden board with sharp stones embedded along its side, called a makana, which in itself is proof of survival. As a matter of fact, with the emergence of DNA testing becoming available to the everyday man slash woman on the street in the late 20th century to the present day, several Jamaicans have been identified as having Taino DNA markers, which present itself as Native American haplogroup markers. A haplogroup is a DNA marker which come through either your mother or your father, which has certain mutation characteristics which can specifically link you to your ancestral lineage or ancestors. Some years ago, while doing research into the ancestry of Colin Jackson, a Welsh Jamaican Olympic silver medalist athlete living in the UK, I was presented with the information that he had been DNA tested and a result of 7% Taino DNA markers were found. This meant that a recent ancestor of his was likely a full-blooded Taino. The four-star General Colonel L. Colin L. Sorry, I'll say that again. The four-star General Colin L. Powell, former Secretary of State of the United States of America between 2001 and 2005, the first African-American Secretary of State, the first African-American head of the Combined Armed Forces of the United States of America, was an American Jamaican of Jamaican parentage. His heritage hailed from St. Elizabeth, and in his autobiography, he proudly acknowledged his Yamaye Taino heritage and descent. Additionally, several ordinary Jamaicans have done their DNA, and more frequently than not, a few have revealed, on average, 1%. This suggests that there were enough living Jamaican Tainos present in the population of the island at the time the English arrived for there to be descendants today. Interestingly, Sir Alexander Bustamante, our first Prime Minister and national hero, often proclaimed that he had Taino ancestry, a claim which was ridiculed by many of his political rivals and others in the emerging Black Power movements of the time as being ridiculous, since the Taino had long died out. Had the DNA existed then, a simple DNA test would have silenced them all. Even more earth-shattering, a recent widespread bit of DNA research was conducted by a team of academics in order to find out the base admixture of the English-speaking Caribbean. A program carried out primarily to locate African markers and European markers had the unintended bonus of finding several persons in Jamaica with Taino percentages mostly ranging in the 1% marker range. However, they did test several Jamaicans with percentages from 8.3% to 13.5%. But the most incredible part of the research revealed a Jamaican living in Jamaica at the present time with 77.7% Taino DNA markers. This person would indeed be considered almost pure-blooded Yamaye Taino right here, right now. The resurgence and the reclaiming of our right to exist in modern Jamaica. Throughout the Caribbean, commencing in and around 1992, the 500th anniversary of the coming of Christopher Columbus to what was later described as the New World in 1492. People of indigenous origin started reasserting their existence in the islands of Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and Cuba. Many people started saying openly they were Taino and they were indeed proud to be Taino. Unknown to many here in Jamaica, this conversation started to occur among a select few Jamaican Taino as well. First beginning with an exhibition at the National Gallery in 1994, our official 500th anniversary. I was among that growing few who knew that my ancestry included those two symbolic standard bearers on our country's coat of arms, and my existence embodied the very motto out of many, one people. The shouts grew louder in the other islands of Cuba, Hispaniola, where both Haiti and the Dominican Republic are located, and the island of Puerto Rico. They started recreating remnants of their lost Taino culture, ways of dress, and religious practices. Several ukayekes were formed, some new, others based on ancestral pre-existing locations and villages. Caciques were installed. Since then, a successful initiative was launched to have Tainos acknowledged by the United Nations and have representation as an indigenous people under the United Nations Charter of the Indigenous Peoples. We here in Jamaica have slowly joined this choir of voices. When we initiated our first cacique in 500 and odd years at Charlestown in Portland. The ceremony followed the traditional rites of a Taino investiture of a cacique, as practiced before the invasion of 1494. He was blessed with the name Cacique Kalan Neborish Cayman, after which the first organized tribe was formed using the political structure which once existed within our ancient communities. The Yamaye Taino has since then been re-establishing our ancestral ceremonies to honor our ancestral ways. As the resurgence grows from strength to strength using archaeological investigation, historical research, and multimodal research, many Jamaican Taino have emerged one by one saying we are proud to be Yamaye Taino, irrespective of color or our borders of residence. Meet Alexa Winter, a young budding filmmaker who lives in the USA and is reclaiming her lineage and the heavy responsibility as keeper of her family's long tradition of staying true to their matrilineal Taino traditions. Meet Erica Dennis and her mother Olive Maxam, The first two to say publicly that they were Taino. They were alive and they were here to stay. The Gleaner article shouted loudly, I am not extinct. She's a brilliant academic and the founder of a bursary to help Indigenous, Black, and Taino students to receive grants to go towards their education in Canada, dedicated in her mother's name. She also holds a master's and a PhD. She's currently a professor at the University of Western Ontario in Canada and is a fellow member of the Yamaye Guaney Council of Elders, of which I am also a member. Let's meet Georgie, Taino name Abaweyu. A Yamaye Taino from St. Elizabeth. He has continued the time-honored traditions of being a fisherman, doing traditional Taino canoe making. Though illness now limits him to only carve miniature replicas of the canoes generations of his family have done, passing on the skills from father to son in the old Taino way. Then next we shall meet Kevin, Taino name Usabone. He was born in Bobwalk, St. Catherine, a descendant of a St. Elizabeth family of Taino. His talent for drawing, for carving abounds, and he creates many ancestral carvings and drawings as well, keeping our close connection with nature and creativity alive. You will see here that he has a lovely drawing that he did of Makwatari, Guayaba, Taino Zimi. You would call it a Zimi, but it's actually a Taino god. And he is the god of the afterlife. He helps you pass over when you die. And he's the Lord of the afterlife. These are only a few of the members of our tribe, which span all walks of life. The Yamaye Taino have stayed silent for far too long. Now that our voices are heard once again, we shall not be silent from now on. And as I say, and as we tend to say in our language, ha home, usa bone. We are alive and we are well and we have survived and we will continue to survive and recreate our culture. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation, Ms. Frankson.